From the newsrooms of the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age, this is The Morning Edition. I'm Samantha Selinger-Morris. It's Thursday, November 13th. Did women ruin the workplace? This was the question that was put forward in a New York Times podcast the other day that, no surprise here, quickly went viral. The main thrust of the argument was that women are gossipy and overly emotional. And so as we take over more and more businesses, we're a threat to the pursuit of truth and innovation. To say that women from across the globe shot back is an understatement.
What do you mean women have ruined the workplace? All that we're asking is to not get sexually harassed or assaulted in the workplace.
New York Times, I'm so glad you decided to help the impending death of legacy media with this kamikaze of a piece.
Honestly, I think I could ruin more things. Is this a dare?
Today, senior writer Jacqueline Maley on so-called conservative feminism and the political and cultural forces that have led us to this moment, and the hilarity and danger wrapped up in this conversation. Hey, Jack, I'm so excited to be with you, just in general, but on this topic specifically.
Yeah, I know. And we were just saying I'm wearing, as if proving the case for the feminisation of the workforce.
Exactly.
I'm wearing a bright pink shirt.
Yeah, I'm assuming it was deliberate.
No, it actually wasn't, but I'm glad. I'm nailed my colours to the mast.
You really have.
Let there be no doubt.
Well, let's get into it. Tell me about the argument that was put forward on this podcast. It, of course, has blown up over social media. What were the main points that really riled people up?
Well, to go back to the original source material, so a woman named Helen Andrews, who is a conservative commentator in the United States, wrote an essay for Compact magazine called The Great Feminisation. And in this essay, she argues that the increasing participation, basically, of women in the workforce and in various sort of high-profile or important professions, like she singles out the legal profession in particular and other things like medicine, academia, even the staff of the New York Times have become, if not 50% female, then maybe a little bit more, although in the legal profession that's absolutely not the case, particularly in the judiciary. But she makes that case and says that that has coincided with what she calls wokeness.
I started by observing our institutions in all the ways that they seem very clearly, self-evidently broken and not working the way that they're supposed to, in ways that you could sum up in the word wokeness.
And she says the rise of wokeness and the rise of the feminisation of the workforces has come in tandem. Therefore, she basically says feminisation has caused wokeness. Wokeness is a terrible thing. Wokeness is basically, she does say, a threat to society, to civilization. And she particularly thinks that this is going to be a threat to the rule of law.
We should always be clear-sighted about the problem that we're trying to solve. And in this case, the particular problem that I'm worried about is wokeness. Because the reason why I think the great feminization thesis is important to talk about is because I see a lot of people walking around right now thinking that wokeness is over. They say the vibe shift is here. We don't need to worry about it anymore. But I'm saying that if it's the result of structural forces and demographic feminization, then we cannot be so complacent because wokeness is here to stay, if that's the case.
Yeah. And so this kind of has been like a bit of a viral essay, and people have been talking about it, particularly in the United States online. And then Ross Douthat, who's a conservative commentator who's quite a famous New York Times columnist, and he picked it up for his podcast, got her on, and also got another sort of conservative. I think she called herself a conservative feminist,
yes,
woman.
Which we'll get into.
So he had a conversation that he was moderating between these two women, and it was called originally. The title of the podcast was "Are Women Ruining the Workplace?" which apparently didn't go down so well.
Funny that.
And caused a lot of blowback on the New York Times and on Ross Douthat in particular. So the title of the podcast, we note, has been changed to "Has Liberal Feminism Ruined the Workplace?"
That's right. And let's get into how women the world over have responded. Like, were there any particular hot takes that really got your attention? And what did you think of it?
Yeah, I mean, look, the thing that I found most befuddling and strange about all of this was just that the essay, in my opinion, is very poorly argued and relies on wild assertions and stereotypical assertions which are not borne out in fact. So, Helen Andrews sort of says that as workplaces have become increasingly feminised, men have been sidelined basically and marginalised. A lot of this, she says, is because of sex discrimination law and sort of sexual harassment law, which she calls a thumb on the scale, which has favoured women over men. So the increasing feminisation of the workforce, which is an absolutely observable phenomenon, which we've seen, even in our working lives, hallelujah. She says that that is not a result of the playing field being levelled for men and women and, and therefore meritocracy being allowed to evolve and women getting into higher positions or getting into great numbers in various workplaces because they're good at their jobs, and before men didn't have to compete with them and now they do. She says it's because there's a thumb on the scale, which is sex discrimination law. So she makes sort of wild, non-factual or unfactual assertions like it is now illegal to employ fewer women than men. And that,
I don't know where that is.
I don't know where it is that companies or organisations or institutions in the United States or indeed anywhere are being taken to law because they don't have enough women in their workforces. In fact, you could cite countless examples, particularly in upper management. She's very concerned with the rule of law. So she says that women or feminine virtues, so empathy, compassion, feelings, and, all sort of woke, what we would now call woke virtues. So, the favouring of safety over risk and the favouring of feeling over rationality, that's sort of female versus male virtues in her opinion. And wokeness favours the female virtues. We've seen, wokeness kind of come in and ruin workplaces. And I just think there's so many sort of irrationalities and factual... they're just completely wrong assertions that are being made, that it's kind of hard to unpick them all and hard to take the essay seriously on its merits, actually. There's things in there that you probably could argue for.
Yeah.
One of the precepts which is sort of underlying the whole thing is that, as she talks about Me Too as being the sort of the high watermark of wokeness and everything that wokeness is, that is wrong with wokeness, right? And you could say that there were excesses in the Me Too movement. Absolutely, there were times when, the rule of law or the principles of the rule of law were overlooked or overturned in favour of other things or other principles. But that's a different conversation.
And so how were they arguing in this podcast that the feminization of the workplace is actually ruining the workplace? Because we know that in Helen Andrews, in addresses that she's given and in her initial source material, like she really sort of argues quite broadly that the feminization of the workplace is almost an existential threat. She's said that, immigration is something she really cares about. And she says, well, the problem there is that we have all these laws in the books that will help us with our borders, but we're not allowed to enforce any of them if they're going to make someone feel bad.
Yeah.
So, right, she argues
basically,
that sort of stuff.
she argues. This is kind of, I think, one of the main threads of her argument is that women are emotional creatures.
Yes,
something that I would absolutely dispute on the facts, and I could debate very strongly. Women are human. Humans are emotional creatures. Men and women definitely express emotion differently and have different ways of dealing with it. Different, but I would say broadly equal. So she says that because women favour emotion, compassion, empathy, that kind of thing, and they don't like the other thing that she says, and this is an oldie but a goodie.
We don't like conflict.
We wage conflict in a sneaky, undermining, backhanded, gossiping behind other people's backs
not
kind
openly,
of way.
like men.
Not openly, the good, clean way like men do. So she's saying that women, they won't wage war openly like men. So she says men have evolved tribally and prehistorically. So a lot of this is a sort of primatologist type view of sex relations or gender relations.
Yes.
But men have evolved to wage war openly and then to settle it, right? I would say, again, I don't see a lot of conflicts that have been well settled. I see examples of conflicts that have been waged by men that are not at all settled. And I think the worst and, one of the most horrific examples of modern history is ongoing in Gaza and Israel now.
Right. And in multiple regions, one could
Right,
argue.
right. I mean, if men knew how to settle wars cleanly and get it over with and done, then we wouldn't have war anymore, presumably. Anyway.
Genocide. I mean, there are countless examples.
Yeah, there are a few examples. But she says that women, on the contrary, are more likely to do it covertly and in a sort of undermining kind of way that just doesn't really end. I think that's the argument.
Yes.
So that's not a good way to run a business. I don't know.
Right,
I don't know
okay.
what she's saying.
Yeah.
She says she's most frightened about the field of the law because the rule of law will not survive the legal profession becoming majority female because the rule of law is not, judges take note. The rule of law is not just about writing rules down.
No, she says, I do not want judges who are more interested in context and relationships than in what the law says.
Yeah. So she says that the rule of law is not just about having the rules, you've actually got to follow them, even when they yield an outcome that tugs at your heartstrings or runs contrary to your gut sense of which party is more sympathetic.
Yeah.
So she's basically saying that female judges in particular, and she's saying, okay, we don't have a majority female judges in the United States, or indeed I would hazard anywhere in the world at the moment, but given that most law graduates now are females in the United States, also the same in Australia, as they work their way through the system, eventually we'll get majority female courts or judges on the courts. And women, female judges will basically respond to the law or respond to cases not according to the law, but according to what tugs at their heartstrings. So that's a kind of a crazy assertion to make.
I mean,
it's deeply insulting to women, and I would say just not bound at all by any basis in fact.
No. And some of the takes are, I mean, a lot of people, I guess, have responded with almost hilarity or just making fun of it because they feel like it's just almost too stupid to be contemplated. Like when you look at the fact that, men, of course, have been in power for arguably millennia.
They've done a great job of it. I don't think. I mean, that's uncontested,
that's
right?
Inarguable.
Yeah, they haven't made any mistakes.
No, that's right.
Everything's been fine.
That's right. I mean, on that point of
they haven't ruined anything.
Nothing has been ruined. And we were talking just before recording that Sophie Gilbert pointed out in The Atlantic. As for emotions running wild, cabinet members brawl in public like rhesus monkeys on HGH. And she pointed out that in September, the Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent reportedly told the Federal Housing Finance Agency Director Bill Pulte, I'm going to punch you in your effing face.
But that's not him displaying emotion.
No,
that's
and
not him
neither
being
is it
emotional.
settling things openly because apparently this had happened because Bessent had heard that Bill had been talking to Trump about it behind his back.
He's displaying some feminine vices there, as Helen Andrews would say, bitching about someone behind their back. There is no doubt in my mind that there is a difference between the sexes, and there is no doubt that women and men behave in different ways and have different strengths, right? And, there's a lot of studies and a lot of research that bears that out, not to mention human observation. But emotion in this context seems to be sort of shorthand for the kind of emotional lability that is probably more common to women. So signs of emotional distress, crying in the workplace. I would definitely bet that more women cry in the workplace than men cry in the workplace. Open distress, worry and anxiety, those kinds of things. Yep. But when we talk about emotion, we somehow discount male expressions of emotion, which tend to perhaps towards rage, anger,
violence,
open hostility, violence, bullying, tantrum throwing.
Yeah.
These are all things that I've been in this workplace, I think for like 2 decades, which makes me feel very old. But I remember when workplaces were much less feminized. And I remember...
What were they like, Jack? I recall too, but I'm just interested in your recollection.
Sexual harassment was rife. Male aggression, open male aggression, displays of open male aggression were common and deeply upsetting and difficult to work with. And I would say that this is something that men would also complain of or observe alongside women. I think the feminisation of the workforce, for whatever you make of it, has made for a more peaceful and civil workforce. And the kinds of things that Helen Andrews doesn't like, sex discrimination legislation, anti-sexual harassment laws, are exactly the things that have made workplaces much more civil, much more decent, run in a much more orderly way that actually allows for greater productivity and allows for, risk-taking is one of the things that she says is a great masculine virtue. And she says the feminisation of the workforce is basically hampering the natural sort of male tendency towards risk-taking. I think it's absolutely true that men are bigger risk-takers. That's completely verifiable in research. You see it with little boys, and you see it all the way through to men. And that's probably why, more men are entrepreneurs or in the tech industry or whatever, arguably, right? But she conflates risk-taking with exposure to risk. So I would say anti-discrimination law, all of that stuff that we've got, all of that infrastructure we've got now to keep us broadly safe in the workplace, the lessening of exposure to risk, particularly for women who no longer have to contend so much with being grabbed at work, being sexually harassed at work, and even being sexually assaulted at work, which has happened a lot. That exposure to risk is much less now, which I would argue actually opens us up and kind of helps us relax in a way that makes us much more productive and much more
prone to innovation.
It allows all of those wonderful innovative capitalist virtues to thrive.
We'll be right back. Let's get into what conservative feminism is, because I think the second woman who was on this podcast, her name's Leah Labresco-Sargent. Yeah. She wrote a book called The Dignity of Dependence. And I believe she sort of affiliates with that term, conservative feminism.
Yeah.
Now, have I been asleep at the wheel for the last few decades? Because I
don't think it's really, as a student of feminism, I don't think it's a really strong tradition. That it's certainly not one where I could name any great thinkers.
Yeah.
I think she actually made much more sense to me, the conservative feminist, self-confessed conservative feminist on that podcast.
Yes.
She's talking about the fact that women in their roles as carers are always going to be, at certain points in their life, more dependent, and that a workplace basically has to be able to fit in around that.
Yep.
That's what I took her argument to be. But she also said, there are certain workplaces which are not going to fit in around that, and they can't. And so maybe women shouldn't go into those workplaces. That's arguable. But what she didn't seem to have clocked, and also the host of the podcast, the moderator, the fella, Ross Douthat, who's now being absolutely slain on the internet.
Like monstered. I mean, we'll get into some of those takes soon because they're some of the funniest, but wow.
For putting this title on his podcast about women ruining the workplace.
He'd have to be hiding,
He's having a tough week, poor old Ross. What they seem to not have clocked or realised exists is third wave feminism, which, as far as I understand it, is based on the idea that we should embrace female difference. So it's not, second wave feminism was much more like, well, women can be as good as men, women can be just like men, women, we can
work just as hard, we can be just as rational,
and so it's
hustle.
Kind of, we can hustle, we can be bosses too, etc. Third wave feminism was like, no, actually women are kind of different and that's okay, and we shouldn't prioritise or honour one type of being or one gender or one stereotypical gender role over another, and we should embrace the caring, nurturing, whatever other feminine virtues that women have or more likely have than men have, but that society should change and evolve. Patriarchy should be smashed so that women can be themselves and not be disadvantaged as a result of their caring roles or their nurturing natures, etc.
And so do you think that this podcast, these three people that have argued this idea, do you think that they got any traction, or is this just
we're talking about it. The New York Times is talking about it, and it's now infiltrated its way into the internet with countless kind of, hot take feminists who are kind of absolutely raking Ross Douthat over the coals. You should read some of them out.
I'm going to have to read some of them out.
They're mean, but they're funny.
Yeah, so they are mean. Let's just warn the listeners here. Today I begin work on my liberal feminist children's book titled, "Oh, the Places You'll Ruin." Like that one. But one woman said, honestly, I think I could ruin more things. Is this a dare? Quite like that. I quite felt myself in that one. I can hear his sleep apnea from here. That was people just, and then
being mean about Ross.
Yeah, being a real mean one about Ross. And yeah, so like you say, I mean, it has really, people have gone wild about it with their takes.
Well, I mean, the most obvious one is men have ruined a lot of stuff.
I mean,
they've waged a lot of wars.
That's right.
They've committed a lot of assaults.
Yeah, or as Sophie Gilbert put it, or at least the person that wrote the write-off in The Atlantic, no, women aren't the problem. America is rapidly becoming the manosphere. But sure, let's go after the feminization of culture.
Yeah, I mean, particularly in the American context, in that article, the Sophie Gilbert article in The Atlantic kind of lays this out so beautifully.
Yes.
In a well-argued and, beautiful prose.
Yes.
America at the moment feels like it is just being kind of like supercharged with testosterone. I mean, we obviously have Trump in the White House. We have him destroying, literally kind of bulldozing the East Wing.
It's about $300 million. It's set to do many, many things, including meetings of foreign leaders, including the honoring of foreign leaders. You can see this. There's
going to be like a UFC fighting wrestling ring, I think, set up outside the White House for some sort of celebration.
Yes.
We have ICE agents, masked ICE agents ripping women, children, undocumented male immigrants off the street and hustling them into vans.
It's apocalyptic. I mean, in its visuals,
and I don't
for sure.
think you could say that, they've changed the name of the Ministry of Defence to the Ministry of War.
Yeah.
That this name change is not just about renaming, it's about restoring. Words matter. It's restoring, as you've guided us to, Mr. President, restoring the warrior ethos, restoring victory and clarity as an end state, restoring intention.
I mean, I don't think we have seen in modern times a more heightened masculine culture in the United States.
No.
And it's sort of spreading, I suppose, through the internet across the world. So it does seem like a strange thing to focus on at this particular moment.
I mean, it does seem bizarre, but I was wondering whether this is perhaps the culmination of a growing wellspring of conservative thought in the U.S. in particular. I mean, obviously, we've seen the rollback of reproductive rights. Do you think this is just a reflection of that? Like maybe we haven't noticed it in our...
look, I think it's really easy to laugh at.
Yeah,
it is easy
that's right.
to dismiss because, as I said, I just don't think it's a very serious piece of work on its intellectual merits. And I'm here for conservative feminism. Like I suspect I'm a conservative feminist myself in some respects, in that I think family is very important. Like I think that women should be supported to be mothers if that's what they want to do, and families should be supported. But I'm here for interesting, well-founded, rational civil debate around feminism, right? Or even the feminisation of the workforce. But what I think this is, because Helen Andrews herself says that she has no solution to this so-called problem, and she says it's a problem, a risk, a threat. Like it's a very catastrophic essay.
It is.
And she says at no other time in history has a society allowed women to control major institutions and major companies. Like it's really like...
That makes my chest tighten.
Well, you substitute another group for women.
Yeah.
You substitute Jews, black people, whatever you like. It doesn't sound so good, right?
It doesn't.
Like it's a very, very it's a very catastrophic tone that she puts in there. And I think that it is loosening, it's moving the Overton window. So it's kind of like loosening up the debate for, well, do we really want women in these positions of power? Aren't they just going to prejudice feelings over facts, and aren't they just going to make decisions based on their vibes rather than on the law? So I think it's making those ideas more mainstream, and we're arguably doing that by even hosting this podcast. I don't know.
Yeah.
But also I think that in a world, particularly in the United States, where reproductive rights are being rolled back, what her big bugbear in this essay is sex discrimination law and sexual harassment law. So workplace legislation that has evened up the scales for men and women. And I think that this kind of debate opens up ground for people to roll back those protections. And those protections have been, I would say, one of the greatest advances that we have made in the 20th and 21st century, because they have allowed and made it safe and feasible for women to enter the workforce in the numbers that we have. So we've achieved parity in sort of most workplaces, I suppose. And why is that important? Well, it's important because it improves living standards, because you're unlocking enormous amounts of human potential. So GDPs go up, productivity goes up. You have a huge resource, 50% of the population that was previously untapped, that is now being economically productive.
Yeah.
But more importantly, it increases human satisfaction and increases, I would say, overall human happiness and the happiness of families, happiness of men and women, because we're participating in a more equal society where everybody gets to do what humans are supposed to do, which is have fulfilling work. And that doesn't mean you don't always have to do that in a workplace. You can do it from home as well. But I think we all know that human beings need something, most human beings need something outside the home and outside of themselves to feel really fulfilled and like they're living a full life and to give their lives meaning. So that's the stakes.
Well, you know how much I love being able to speak to you about difficult and controversial subjects that sort of need to be ironed out or at least made somewhat clear. So thanks, Jack.
Thanks for having me.
Today's episode of The Morning Edition was produced by myself and Chi Wong. Our executive producer is Tammy Mills. Our head of audio is Tom McKendrick. The Morning Edition is a production of The Age and the Sydney Morning Herald. If you enjoy the show and want more of our journalism, subscribe to our newspapers today. It's the best way to support what we do. Search The Age or smh.com.au/subscribe and sign up for our Morning Edition newsletter to receive a comprehensive summary of the day's most important news, analysis, and insights in your inbox every day. Links are in the show notes. I'm Samantha Selinger Morris. This is The Morning Edition. Thanks for listening.